Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. It's a wonderful Thursday over here in coastal Virginia, beautiful Gloucester Courthouse, about 15-minute ride north of Yorktown, Virginia. So thanks for being here with us today. I appreciate it very much. So let's start off with our breathing exercise this morning. Remember, it's in through the nose, hold out through the mouth. So let's begin. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here. I well, this is kind of one of those mornings. I wonder how it's going to go. Not really. I'm not really as focused this morning as I often am. Yet, what I know is that it's really important for me to choose what it is I know is so, and then act accordingly or move out. That's the main deal. Um, I know there are many out there who are like I am, and those of us who are were raised here in the United States of America in the 40s, late 40s, 50s, 1960s, and we were generally raised with the idea that there's a God, and that God is out here, out there somewhere, observing what's going on, passing some sort of judgment on the activity that this individual person participates in, and that judgment is written down, and that a time will come when I must account for my activity. And if I have made choices that go against the rule of order that is presented by the God outside of myself, then I will be destined to immortality in a space of significant suffering as it is presented that this physical body would go to. So, fire is the one that was used most. That if I didn't do right, then I would be condemned to a place called hell. And in this place called hell, there would be fire and brimstone, and I would suffer for my inherent wrongs. And the only way to get out of that, being born in the United States of America in 1952, to a Judeo Christian family, is to be baptized, to have water poured over my head, and that would wash with some prayers and some blessings, and that original sin that I was born with, that original wrong, that original bad that I was prior to that baptism would be washed away, and then there was hope that I could do some good and follow the rules primarily, and then go to the pearly gates when I cease breathing in this body, be judged by St. Peter as to whether or not I'm good enough to get into heaven. And if I haven't committed any mortal sins, then I would be, and I had committed some venial sins, then I would be sentenced to purgatory, and I would remain there until I had burned off my sins. And purgatory was like hell, but it wasn't forever, it was just for a certain period of time. And after I had suffered enough from the sins that I had committed, I would then be allowed into heaven, and then I could live eternally at the feet of God. Now, if I had committed a mortal sin, I would go to hell, and there was no hope, none whatsoever. And so, I offer to you for consideration that that whole teaching process that I was raised with set in motion a subconscious undercurrent to my whole existence and my whole being, and that I operated out of that undercurrent as I move forward through my whole life. And what I came to realize over time, over study, over looking at all of the religions of the world, after looking at spiritual understanding, spiritual writing, spiritual truth over all of that time, looking beyond the fundamentals that I was given, looking at the Essenes, reading and understanding the Essenes, reading and understanding the Coptics, reading and understanding the mystics of Islam, reading and understanding the mystics of all of the religions of the world, reading Joseph Campbell, studying the myths of the indigenous peoples and how those myths carried forward into my understanding and experience of today, I came to realize that the basic teaching of my childhood, which was there is a God, and that God is out there somewhere and resides in a place known as heaven, where he will judge the living and the dead, and you have one life, one opportunity to do it correctly enough to eventually reside eternally in that place known as heaven, was not in fact so. It wasn't out of any malice whatsoever that my parents and my grandparents and their grandparents, my great grandparents, it was not out of any sense of malice that they taught me all that. They honestly believed in the essence of their soul that it was true. As I looked at it, and as I grew, and as I read more and more about what is happening, as much as I possibly could gather about what's going on in this world, reading people like Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, reading people like Catherine Ponder, reading people like H. Emily Cady and Emmett Fox, reading people like Neil Donald Walsh, reading people like Heidegger, I came to realize that although it was presented and although it was the status quo of that period, it simply is not so. And then what came along was a little bit broader expansion that we like to call today quantum physics, and how the quantum consciousness and understanding of how this is all woven together expands again that understanding of eternal experience by each being. The question that is presented to me is, having chosen that it is in fact the case that God is, and God is everything, everywhere, in places I know, in places I don't know, in this three-dimensional dimension where I exist, in all other dimensions where I may or may not exist, I believe that I do, where I exist in a different form and a different vibratory rate, and it's all happening simultaneously. And that the goal of this experience is to realize that wholeheartedly in this three-dimensional body. The choice I'm presented with is, am I going to unravel that teaching, that programming, if you will, that I was raised with, that was recorded in my subconscious? Am I going to actively choose to pursue a method, any method, that will undo that training and eliminate the fear that it holds in the existence of this human being? This human being. Because the fear doesn't exist in the spiritual being. It only exists in the mind of this human being. And so I offer to you that that is where we all are. All of us who are knowledgeable enough to realize that this three-dimensional experience is only one of, not one off. This is the three-dimensional experience. There is also a fourth dimensional experience and a fifth dimensional experience. And each of those experiences are of God. God is omnipotent. And to realize that God is everywhere, therefore, the essence of this Paul Fitzsimmons material manifestation is God. And to accept and embrace that the point of this experience is to realize that divine expression as myself, and then express it and share it with the world around me. And it's not necessarily little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey. Because there's order in the universe. There's an order to how things happen. And if I choose to step aside from that order or to make a choice that moves me in opposition to that order, it's going to push back. It's going to push back. And when it pushes back, as I'm conditioned to believe there's something known as good and something known as bad, then I'm going to react and go, oh, that's not good. That's bad. When in reality, it's simply the resistance of disorder. Order being ease, at ease, then disorder becomes dis-ease. And I experience an unsettled experience. And as the vibration in the human body in this three-dimensional material experience becomes unbalanced and more electronic or electric energy goes to one portion than it goes to another, or one is cut off, then this dis-ease manifests itself into a three-dimensional malady, and then it must be addressed, and all the focus of the three-dimensional mind goes to the dis-ease, and one finds oneself absorbed in the fear that operates in the subconscious from the training I originally began this three-dimensional experience with. So, the incredible practice of affirmative acknowledgement or affirmative prayer becomes highly valuable. Everything operates out of, I am separate from all that is, and therefore this is happening to me. Yet, when I state emphatically, I am the presence of God wherever I am, I am part of all that is wherever I am, I am eternally experiencing my own divinity wherever I am, that begins to undermine the inappropriate training and begins to free me from the illusion of suffering in this three-dimensional reality. Know yourself as the presence of God wherever you are. Choose. It says in Genesis that the God of Genesis gave human beings dominion over this three-dimensional plane. So if in fact that has any validity, you and I have the choice of who we are and what we will or will not embrace. I acknowledge you as the presence of God. I am grateful to be here on this planet along with the rest of me. And I thank you for dropping by. Namaste, namaste, namaste.